Yesterday, we learned a Mishnah on Daf Ayin Teshamid Beis that was discussing the halachas of Nemonos when a husband is believed, when a father is believed. And the Gemara taught us that if someone goes with his wife, the Mishnah teaches us, if someone goes with his wife to Medina Sayyam, and years later he comes back with a woman and children, he first, right off the bat, he's believed to say that this is my wife. She might have aged a bit, but he's believed to say this is my same wife. Therefore, we have already determined when he married her that she was a miyucheses. They already did their scrutiny of the 4 generations of mothers, and we can assume she's the same miyucheses that she was when she got married. We can assume this is the same woman. We're not choshid that maybe his wife died and this is another woman. The children, if they're young little children that are attached to their mother, that's proof enough that these are her children. And therefore, once we already know that her yichus is established, their yichus is established. However, adult children, who there is no obvious proof that this is their mother, for those adult children, we need to bring a riot that these children are the children of this mother, and then they could tap in to her reliable yichus. So the main points that we learned were that he's the nemonis, that these are the children of a woman only applied if they're kruchen achareha, if they're connected, if they're attached to her, and she only, her yichus does not have to be proven if the claim is that she is the same wife. But once we're talking about a potential for a possibility that maybe this is a new wife that he married, then he would have to once again reestablish her yichus in the city that he arrives at. So Amar Reish Lakish, so we're right at the bottom of Daf Ayin Teshamid Beis, the last 3 words. Amar Reish Lakish, Lo Yishanu, this that we said, Rashi tells us the Samchinon Hakruchen, that you could rely on the fact that these children are attached to the mother, and therefore they could tap into the yichus of the mother, is only the kachei agvul. What is the definition of kachei agvul? Im koyin hu, if he's a koyin, oichlin bekachei agvul, which was referring to truma, kachim that even not in the Beis Hamikdash are kachim even everywhere in Eretz Yisrael. Mishehevi raya al ishazu shiksher lekahuna. Once it's proven that this woman is ksher lekahuna, either because this is his original wife, or even if this is a new wife that he married in Medina Sayyam, but he verified her yichus, soimchen al abonim akruchem achareh. You can assume that the children, the little children that are connected to her, they share her yichus. Leimer bana hein ve'enan chalal. Aval yuchsin, and this is where we have a machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. Aval yuchsin im yesh behen banais. What if there's daughters there? Einon nisis l'kayhanim. You can't assume that they tap into their mother's yichus and allow them to marry kayhanim, because your raya isn't enough that merely because they're attached to her. It's not enough of a raya that these are the children of this mother. You would need some type of raya, in fact, that these girls are the children of this mother whose yichus we've already verified. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos does not like Rashi's pshat, because Tosfos asks, we paskin mylin metruma liyuchsin. Mylin metruma liyuchsin means if you see someone eats truma, then you will say they're miyucheses. So if that's the case, why would you make that distinction between truma and yichus? And therefore, Tosfos learns that biyuchsin means legabe giving somebody misa. In other words, how do we know that this is the child of this mother, and chas v'sholem, if this child is mizana with that mother, that child would be mechuyev misa? For that we're not believed. So therefore, if he's mizana with his mother, we would need Adam to prove that this is his mother in order to be mechayev the misa. That's how Tosfos learns what yuchsin means. Let's see how well this L'tamei works out according to Rashi, and let's see how well it works out according to Tosfos. Rabbi Yochanan is following his same old shita. The Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Malkin ala chazakos. You can give somebody malchus if there's a chazaka, Soiklin v'sarfin ala chazak. You can even kill somebody because of a chazak. Ve'ein sarfin truma ala chazak. But you won't burn truma, assuming that it's tummy because you relied on the chazak. So let's stop for a moment. If you learn like Tosfos, that leyuchsin means to kill somebody because we can assume because of the chazaka that this child is connected to the mother, that it's the child of the mother. So that makes sense. We have a beautiful riot. So it's exactly the case that Rabbi Yochanan was talking about. But according to Rashi, that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that leyuchsin, they're believed. How do you see that from here? This Bryce is not even discussing yuchsin. So Tosfos comes to the rescue to explain how Rashi sees a raya from Rabbi Yochanan to Soimchen al Chazak even by Yuchsin. So Tosfos all the way at the end of the first Tosfos says Tzarich Loimar the Hachi Ma'isi Raya Cycling v'Sarfin al Chazakos the culture came to them in Yuchsin. If you'll even kill somebody for it, surely you'll assume this is a kshera and they could marry Kayan. So those are the two mahalchim of Rashi and Tosfos. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. Malkin al chazak. You give somebody malchus because of a chazak. So you don't have a raya that this person should be mechuyev malchus, but there's only a chazak. Kirav Yehuda. The case would be like Rabbi Yehuda's case. Rabbi Yehuda. We've discussed this many times. A woman who wore big nida. There's no Adam that sees that she's a nida, but she wore big nida, so it's accepted. There's a chazaka that this woman is probably a nida. The halach is baila loika la mishum nida. If they have edus that the Baal was lived with her, whatever edus would be required, he would get malchus because nida is a chayv increase. So you get malchus for it. So you see that a chazaka alone is enough to be mechay if somebody malchus. I'm sorry? Nosy neighbors. That's right. That's right. So remember we discussed the shaila if an amasla works. So what if a woman wore big denida because she had a headache and she wasn't in the mood and she didn't want her husband to come home that night and to be interested. So she wears big denida to push him off, and then the next night she says, "Okay, now I feel much better. Let's get together." She's huchskunida. So there she can say, "I only did it because I had a headache." There's an amasla. Or the case of the Piska Tshuva shaila was where a woman kept on having a miscarriage, and she thought it's because there was an Ein Hara on her. So she wanted to wear big denida even when she was expecting. And the question was, could she live with her husband in the meantime? Could she be with her husband in the meantime? Again, the Shal Tshuva Sarama patkined that such a masla will work because she's only projecting that she's a nida because of the Ein Hara. And he brought a raya. I think it's from next week's parsha, from this week's parsha. I think it's from next week's parsha, where Yitzchak came to Avimelech and he said that Rivka was his sister. And then it says that Avimelech saw Yitzchak with his sister. Once Yitzchak declared that Rivka was his sister, that's mamish like Hochsaganida b'shcheneseh. She became usher to him with a chi of Kores. Nevertheless, Yitzchak lived with her. It would be allowed. So you see that with a good amasla, even Hochsaganida b'shcheneseh, you can be making. You also you also give misa because of a chazaka. The Rabba bar Avhuna, Dama Rabba bar Avhuna, Ish v'Isha, Tinik v'Tinoikis, Shegdila b'Soich habayis. There's a family that grew up together. Everybody knows the mother and the father and the children. Even though there's no specific Adam that can verify with certainty that these children are both the children of these parents, nevertheless, Niskol and Zelza, if either one of these people has nus with each other, there would be a chi of skila, v'nisrav and Zelza. So we're relying simply on the chazak and the fact that they live together all this time. We're allowed to make that assumption that they are family, and therefore there will be a chi of skila. Amr Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amr Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapar. Ma'isa be'isha shabas l'Yerushalayim. A woman once showed up from a different community. She showed up in Yerushalayim. V'tinuk murkav la'al kseifa, and she was carrying a baby on her shoulder. And they lived together for years. She raised him. So it was obvious that this was her child. And then later on in life, Rahman al-Itzlanu ba'aleha, there was a snus there. V'yaviyam levezin v'saklam. Even though there's no age that this was her child, rather it was the chazaka She raised him. They lived together. That's a raya enough that you can give someone skila. So you see, Soiklin, the Sarfin, Allah Chazakas. It's not because we had Adam that we're able to verify with certainty that this was her son. You see, this child was attached to the mother. That's a raya, as we learned earlier. That's a raya that this is the child of the mother. And if you remember, there was only one exception to that rule, and that is if someone had two wives and the other wife's not here. Thank you so much. Then we will say that could be he'll be karach of the woman who raised him, even though it wasn't his mother. But normally you can assume it was his mother. Okay, thank you so much. The ain't. Yeah, I finally got it early. I'm trying to start again at 6:00 because late they didn't come so late, but I'm working on becoming early. Today became early. I came early. I didn't want to start at 6 because it's not fair. The idol knows that I don't roll around till 6:08. So I'm like, I pushed it 6:03. Tomorrow I'm hoping to start at 6 sharp. I'm trying to get back to where we're holding. Now that I said it in public, now tomorrow morning when I want to roll over after the alarm rings, I'll say, "Oh, I already told the I'm coming on time." Okay, the ain't surfing truma la chazakas. You don't burn truma because of a chazak. The Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. This is mamish a Rosh Hashiva's Shir Gemara. The Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish surfing ala chazakas. You could burn truma based on a chazaka. If you have Yochanan Amar ain't surfing, you will not burn truma based on a chazaka. And they follow their shitas elsewhere. The Tanan, Tinik Shenimsa B'tzara Isa. There was an Isa of Truma. So if it becomes Tomei, you got to burn it. So Tinik Shenimsa B'tzara Isa. There was a child that was sitting beside the dough. And he had dough in his hands. And Rashi learns that if there's dough in his hands, you have no doubt that he must have taken a piece of dough off the big clump of dough that was there. So without a doubt, this child touched the dough. Reb Meir Mitayr v'Chachamim Mitam. Reb Meir holds that the dough is tahar, and the Chachamim hold that the dough is tamei. Why? Mipnei shedake shel tinach litapeach. Rashi learns, what does it mean litapeach? The child touches things. So we have no suffix that this child touched the dough. That's how we got a piece. The question is this child tamei or not? Since roiv tinoikos, since it's the derech of a tinnik, it's like a chazaka that every tinnik touched something that was creepy and cool, and therefore the tinnik for sure, or there's a chazaka that the tinnik touched the sheretz. So you can rely on that fact, and therefore the dough is tummy. And we'll see why our mayor's matar. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos learns, by no means is it sure that he touched the dough. Fakert. The sure is that the child is tummy. It's a vade that the child is tummy. Why? Tosfos brings other reasons. Because the noshim nidos megapapos umanashkos soisoi. A little child would have been hugged and kissed by a nishanida. So a child is assumed to be vade tummy. According to Rashi, the child vade touched the dough. The question is if he was tummy or not. According to Tosfos, the child is vade tummy. The question is did he touch the dough? How does he have a piece of dough in his hand? Maybe an adult who was taller broke off a piece of the dough and gave it to the child to play. So according to Tosfos means the child probably did touch the dough. So according to Rashi, the suffix is if he became tamei, and according to Tosfos, the shayla is if the child who was for sure tamei touched the dough. Play-Doh. That's right. That's right. Finally, someone made a product. Vavina ba. My time in Reb Meir. The Gemara wants to know what is the svara of Reb Meir who says that it's tar.
So what's the dilution for the mitap from lotrasha, lotrasha?
It's l'tapeich ba'ashba, and according to Tosfos, l'tapeich ba'isa.
He's going to touch that dough, or he likes to play with dough. That's what somebody gave it.
No. The assuming that he touched the dough itself. Otherwise, where's the tumah? As an aside, I want to mention a very, very beautiful. I think it's a Meshach Chachma. If you notice that all of the shrotzim are tummy. So why is it that a nachash isn't tummy? You have a lizard, all these different things are tummy. Why isn't it nachash tummy? It almost fits into the same family as other shvatim that are tummy. I'm sorry? I guess that doesn't stop it from being tummy. So I think it's something Meshech Chochma that I heard. I hope I'm not quoting the wrong person. It passes for the Meshech Chochma, such a word. Because the Torah says the ways of the Torah are beautiful. Could you imagine if there was a snake which is life-threatening? The snake bite can kill somebody, and a person that's going, I better not kill it, I might become tummy. That's the Rebbe Shalom wants it that when it comes to safety, a person won't have to think for a nanosecond before he takes action to kill a snake that could be a sakana. But if a snake would be tamei, if a Kadosh Baruch would have made that a snake is tamei, a person would hesitate for a second, and that could come to a sakana. I don't think a tarantula is nearly as dangerous as a snake. Okay. You can use your soul. Okay, so my time with Reb Meir. What is this for, Reb Meir? Because of a roiv tinoikos metapchen. Reb Meir holds there's a roiv of tinoikos who are metapich. So according to Rashi, who touch tuma, according to Tosfos, who will touch the dough. Umiyut en metap. There's a miyut of children who are not metavech bas, who are not metavech, but did already out. The Isa becheskes tahayre members. Before this whole suffix occurred, the Isa was assumed to be tar. Therefore, usmoich miuta lechazaka. If you take the miyut of children who are not metavech and you connect it to the chazaka that the Isa is tar, Israel the miyut combined with the chazaka will be able to overpower the roiv, and therefore Zok Reb Meir it's tahar. Rabbanon miuta command lesadam. We don't pay any attention to the miut at all, and therefore ruba v'chazaka ruba adif. If you have roiv and chazaka, you follow the roiv. Now this is a major sugya. Let's look at Rashi to see how he understands this. Zok Rashi smoich miuta the ein metapchin lichazaka the isa to the chazaka that the isa is tar. The Isra Ruba, together the miut with the chazaka will override the roiv, the metapkin. So Reb Meir lebatel miuta legamri. According to Reb Meir, the miut is not batel legamri. The shemin lei the chay shel miuta because it's chay shel miuta hilchach bim koymei oimik. The miut remains there. The chimaska chmidi listarufi bahadei, and if you could find something to connect the miut to, such as the cheskas, the higher the dough, mitzdarif. So the Achroinim ask, Rabbi Chanan speaks about this, Rabbi Salevi speaks about this. What is the case of Chashin and Lemiuta of Reb Meir? You know what the case is? The case is Reb Meir does not allow a katan or ktana to do yibum. Why? Because what are we going to do if it turns out that this katan was a sris and therefore, or she's an island and therefore there's no chiyav yibum? Kum techoist, this katan did his nus with his brother's wife. So Reb Meir holds we will not let a katan do yibum because we won't be soymech on the roiv that he's probably a healthy male and he could do yibum. Rather, we have to be choshesh l'miuta. That is a chash miderabana. Where really he's mechuyev in yibum. You have a roiv. Reb Meir holds let's be extra vigilant. Let's wait till he becomes an adult till for sure he reaches maturity. So how do you get from there to being mater, being matara dough, because now you have a miyut to be soymech to the chazak? It's a little bit of a jump. It's a little bit of a stretch. So Rabbi Chanan explains that the Rabbanon would not have been machmer about this miyut unless they held that midaraisa, that miyut is not to be ignored. There's a real miyut there. So that's why these shitas are totally zebazeh. From the fact that Reb Meir is chayish l'miyuta, the Chacham don't pick out chumras out of their hat. They know that midaraisa, that miyut is a miyut that's to be reckoned with. And therefore, you don't say when there's a roiv that the miyut is command lesadami, the miyut is there. Therefore, Reb Meir holds we need to be choshit for it because it's there. Even though we're being choshit for it only midirabanan, but there's still a miyut there. And that miyut that's still there can be used even in the deraisa setting when you could be soymechet to a chazaka. While the Rabbanan say miyut command lesadami, the miyut is nothing. Therefore, we're not chosh l'miyut because when there's a miyut, the miyut is not to be considered at all. The batel legaberuba, Rabbanan tamayid lechai shalomiyut. Kavaltik. So you clearly see in the Gemara that Ruba v'chazaka, Ruba adif. That's what the Gemara says. In the Rabbanon, where there's no miut to reckon with, it's just the roiv that says that this Isa is tamei. You have a cheskes tahira of the Isa, Ruba v'chazaka, Ruba adif. Why is Ruba v'chazaka, Ruba adif? Chazaka is a pretty good raya too. The teretz is there's actually a big shaila on lumdus how chazaka works and how roiv works. Roiv and chazaka can either be what we call a birur. It tells us what the metzias is, what actually happened. The chazaka tells us that the Isa did not become tamei. The roiv tells us that the Isa did become tamei. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at roiv and chazaka is that it's a psak din. We don't know what happened, but when there's a roiv, the Torah tells you to follow the roiv. We don't know what happened, but when there's a chazaka, the Torah tells you to follow the chazaka. So there are those who learn that chazaka is a psak, is a hayra. It's not telling us that just because the dough was Torah until now, it verifies that the dough was still Torah. It says when you're in a matzav of suffix, paskin this way. Roiv is a beer. Roiv tells you this is actually what happened. So Ruba the Chazaka, Ruba Adiv, because a beer of the facts will definitely overrule a hayra. Because once we have a beer of the facts, we no longer need the hayra for the suffix. So that's how some Achrayim explain why Ruba the Chazaka, Ruba Adiv. This type of chazaka, where the Chachamim said, Ruba v'chazaka, Ruba adif, you would actually burn the truma. This dough, you would have to burn. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, that's not how I understand the Chachamim when they say metamin. Enzu chazaka, shesarfin ala truma. You would actually not burn the Isa in this case, because it might be tar. You can't burn it. You're not allowed to be ma'abit truma b'yadayim. So you would not be able to burn it. As Rashi says, they didn't say it's tamei that you burn it. No, they say it might be tamei. You're not allowed to eat it. So where would Rabbi Yochanan agree that you have such a good chazaka that you could rely on it, take it to the bank, and you could even burn truma for it, meaning you could be 100% sure that this truma is tamei? It's not in a different case. Isa b'saycha bayis. You have a dough in the house, and you definitely need to give Moshe Joseph a call, because running around your house, you have shrotzim and svardim mitaplim shom. You have insects and frogs and shrotzim running around your house. Your wife is screaming at you, get home, I can't live in this house. It's full of insects. And then pieces are falling off of them. Right? Pieces are falling off of them. The nimtzu chatichas pisa. And now you came home, and you're for weeks your wife is bugging you. Your wife is bugging you for weeks and weeks to call the terminator. You're too cheap. One day you came home for supper. She cut you a piece of bread, and there's a piece of something in there. She said, "What is this?" She said, "What is this?" I told you to call the exterminator. I don't know what it is. There's all these creepy crawlers around the house. That's what it is. So the question is, if it's svardeya inside, the isa is tar. If it's a sheretz inside, the isa is tamei. And we can't recognize what these little pieces are inside it. Is the Isa Tamei or is it Torah? Zok the Brisa, im roiv shrotzim, if most of the insects running around the house are shrotzim, Tamei, then you consider it's Tamei. Im roiv tzvardim, if most of the animals running around this house are frogs, Torah it's Torah.
Got a bigger problem.
That's because you're not used to the old lifestyle.
But you clearly see in those days they cut out the pieces and they eat the rest of the dough. Right? We throw the whole thing in the garbage. Anyway, so why is this any different than the other case? Here you have a roiv. If you have a roiv shrotzim, you'll say it's tamei. And over there you have roiv tinoikus mitapchem ba'ashba, and it's not vaday tamei. Why is Rabbi Yochanan making that distinction? Why is one vaday? Why is one suffix? Zokt Rashi makes it very clear to us. Im roiv shrotzim. Im abayis muchzekas liosh shrotzim mitzuyim shom yoser mitzvardim. If there's more lizards than frogs, then tamei, then this isa will be tamei. Afli sarif, you could be so sure that you could even burn the truma and assume it vade became tamei. The chazaka veruba the isa kaman. Zok Rashi, there's a big distinction between the roiv of tinoikus mitapchem ba'ashba and the roiv tzvardim. Roiv tinoikus mitapchem ba'ashba is not really a roiv; it's a statistic, right? A statistic. There's nothing here. We're just saying a statistic. That's not so strong. But a real roiv, where we know roiv of the shrotzim in the house are tome, that's a ruba de isakaman. It's a roiv that's right here. That's why you could take it to the bank. A ruba de isakaman, you could rely on 100%, because you could say the miut is bottle in the roiv. By a ruba de lesakaman, it's a statistic. You can't say the meat is bottle in the roiv. But when you have two pieces of basar, shchuta, on one piece of basar nevela, and they're mixed together, we say it's batal baroiv. So here you have a bittul baroiv. That's where you could say 100% that the dough is tummy. It's just a statistic. By a statistic, the roiv isn't as strong. The meat will not be batal in the roiv. Even if you don't know like a mayor, there's still something to it, and therefore you would not be soymach on it to the point that you would say it's vadei tamei, only to the point that it's safek. I'm going to prove to you that when the Chachamim said that this dough is tamei, it means it's safek tamei, not vadei tamei, that you could burn it. Because the following brisa, the brisa says, Shnei dvarim ein b'hem das l'shoel. There are two cases where it's ein b'hem das l'shoel. Well, there's a rule. Whenever a safek tumah breaks out, and there's no one with das l'shoel, what happened? For instance, it's a safek if a mouse touched it or not. You cannot ask a mouse, did you touch it or not? So if it's ein b'hem das l'shoel, really it would be mutter, it would be tar by default. But the chachamim were machmer v'osam chachamim and therefore we could be metamed. And what are the two examples of these items? Tinuk v'oidacheres. So right away you see we're comparing the case of tinuk, which we're familiar with, we just learned it, to the v'oidacheres. So we're going to prove that the v'oidacheres is only a safek tumah, not a vadei tumah, and therefore, since the brisa says the tinuk and the v'oidacheres are the same halacha, if the v'oidacheres we can prove is only a safek tumah, it would also prove that the tinuk is safek tumah. And that will prove Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of the Chacham. So Tinuk had Amoran, which is the roiv Tinuk b'tapchim be'ashba. V'yoid acheres mahi isa b'sech habayis. What happens if you have a dough inside your house, v'tarnagoyim, and you have chickens in the house, umashkim tmei mishal, and there's water that's tamei, and if the water that was tamei came in contact with the dough, it will make the dough tamei. How could the water become tamei? Simple. If the chickens drank some of the water, and there's still water in their beaks, and then they peck away at the dough, they're going to drop some of the water that's tamei into the dough. And that's exactly what happens. The nimtzu nekurim, you saw peck marks. Nekurim be'isa, you saw peck marks on the dough. So you know for sure that the chicken pecked on the dough. We assume the chicken had water. The question is maybe the water dried up, or maybe we don't know if there's water. Was there water in the beak of the chicken when the chicken pecked on the dough? Why did the chicken cross the street? Because he wanted to peck on the dough, right? So the halacha is toilin v'loy oichlin v'loy sofer. It's a suffix. So you have a rye from here. You have a rye from here. So Rashi, im izazu shel truma. If this dough is truma, chayshinon shema shotzu atarnagoyel mimashkim atmeim. We're afraid that the tarnagoyel drank from the mashkim atmeim. Uvaoida mashka tefech b'char tumein. And while the mashka was still in their beaks, nakru beisa. That makes it tummy. But you see, it's clear it's a suffix tummy. So Rashi with the Ka'amar Shnei Devarim Halalu also Kamishi Yesh B'das L'Shoel, since the brisa compares the case of Tinuk to the case of the dough over here with the chickens, Vishanin Ubachsam and Toilin, and we know for sure in the case of Nikurin, it's only a suffix. Mechlal the Tinuk Chaylin, it's logical to say that in the case of Tinuk Toilin as well, and that's exactly how Rabbi Yochanan understood the words of the Chachamim Metamim, that it's only a suffix. Beautiful. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. This that we say it's a suffix, and we have to be concerned.
They just saw it. Sure.
No, they know for sure it's a peck mark. Yeah. So Zakim Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Lo yishanu ela b'mashkim levei. If there was a peck mark, well, we might see the impression, we might see the coloring of the liquid that was there. So if it was clear liquid, I understand why you would have to suspect. Because if it was clear liquid and it got absorbed into the dough, you would not be able to recognize it. But if it was red liquid, you would have known. So therefore, if you don't see any red marks on the dough, you can assume that the dough is tar. Frank the Gemara, how could you assume that the dough is tar? He saw. Maybe at the time of the pecking it got red, but you're there right now. The dough could have absorbed that red liquid, and you might not be able to tell. So you still have to be choishin. Rabbi Yochanan, Dr. Rabbi Yochanan, Dover Zeh Shama Beribi, the great Rebbe Rabbi Shua Levi heard this halacha, Upirusha Lo Shama, but he didn't get the full understanding of it, and that's why he's stuck over here with our problem. And let me tell you the real understanding of this halacha. Lo shanu el b'mashkim tzlulim. When would we say that you have to be choishin, even by a red water that the chicken might have pecked at it, and you won't be able to tell, even though red water got onto the isa? That is b'mashkim tzlulim shebebua shaltinik nikabem. It's clear, it's red, but it's a clear red, and you could see your shadow with it. And there's a shadow in the Rishonim. What's the significance of bebua shaltinuk? I won't get into that. But I'll call them, if it's clearish water, it has a glare, you see your shadow, that's clear enough that it could have gotten absorbed into the dough, and therefore, even if it's colored, you do have to be concerned that its tame may be absorbed into the dough. But if it was cloudy water, I guess it means it was thicker, that water, if it was red and the chicken pecked at it, you surely would have seen it live. So therefore, Reb Shimon Levi, if he would have wrestled it to the ground, he would have known that we say b'mashkim adumim, you can assume it's tar. That's only mashkim adumim. That's achkurim that we would not have been absorbed into the dough, and therefore, since you don't see it, it couldn't affect. But if it's red water that could have been absorbed into the dough, we still have the same chashad. Okay, now we're changing gears and we're learning about the main sugya of Hilchas Yichud. And this Mishnah discusses Hilchas Yichud, and it starts off with a big machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. So let's start with Yichud. Lo yisyachid odam.
One question about that. if the chicken had some juice, whatever, even the main thing was dirty, even a drop of water still, a drop of
so the Gemara is telling us that even if it's just a drop, but if it was dirty water, it would not have been totally absorbed, and you would have seen an impression on the dough. Zok the Gemara, lo yisyachid odam im shtei noshim. A person is not allowed to be miyachid, even with two women. A person can't be miyachid. Why not? One's going to watch the other. Zokt Rashi, mepnei shedaiton kala, ushtei anoichos liispatois. She's not going to be embarrassed to be mizana with this man. Her friend's watching. She knows her friend's going to do it too, and therefore they each have each other's secrets, and therefore it's not a good protection. Aval isha achas, but one woman misyachedes im shtei anoshim. Men, you have the problem. So therefore, one woman can be miyachid with two men. Rab Shimon says, "Af ish echad misyachid im shtei noshim." One man could be miyachid with two women. Bizman she'ishta imoy, if his wife is with him. So I'm reading this Mishnah b'pashtus as it says it over here. So the way I would understand it, Pashup Shad, is that Rab Shimon might even be more machmir than the Rabbanan, because he's saying if you have two women together and his wife, then they could be together. But what about if it's his wife and one woman? It's mashma according to Rab Shimon. You wouldn't be able to be together, right? That's how it's pashtus mashma from this Mishnah. However, Tosfos doesn't like this prat, and we're going to learn Tosfos inside, but he sticks into it ubizman. So Rab Shimon Omer af ish echad misyachad mishtei noshim. He's being makel over the Rabbanon, and another halacha unrelated that Tzai Rab Shimon and Tzai the Rabbanon agree with is uvizman sheishta imoy. He can even be miyachid with one isha. That's how Tosfos learns. Let's see this Tosfos inside. That's how you understand. You have a Tosfos mind. You have a Tosfos mind. Rab Shimon Omer af ish echad misyachid mishtei noshim bizman sheishta imoy mashma de Rabbanon afilu ishta imoy also lisyachid im shtei noshim. It's mashma according to the Rabbanon. Even if it's ishta imoy, he wouldn't be able to be miyachid with two women. Va'afilu Rab Shimon nami im shtei noshim ve'ishta imoy hu deshori. Aval isha achas afilu ishta imoy also. That's how Rashi seems to learn. The kasher mahida perik ein mamid. Tosfos brings rayas from other gemaras. It says gabe hadatnan loy tisyachid isha iman. A woman may not be miyachid with two goyim. Uboya lo begemara. The Gemara asked her in the Gemara, the Mayaskin, what's the case? If it means she shouldn't be miyachid with one goy, u'tekavosa be Yisrael mishari. Never mind the goy, even with a yid, she's not allowed to be miyachid. But not lo yisyachid. Umatek the Gemara fears ois v'sheishtoi shall oived kechavim imah. It's speaking, she's not to be miyachid with a goy, even if the guy's wife is with him. Why? Even if the guy's with his wife, that won't prevent him from being nizana. Yisrael ishte mishamartoi. But a Yisrael who's there with his wife, for sure he won't do znus. So you have a klor right from Dakamor that everybody seems to hold that any man who's with his wife, there's no problem of yichud according to everybody. Since we didn't say it's going according to Reb Shimon, everybody holds that if you're with your wife, there's no problem of yichud. And it's also mashma that if there's even only one other woman there besides your wife is a protection. So therefore, Tosha doesn't like the assumption that we made based on Rashi. And he has a different shot. Lakach near Lari, the Rabbanon, the Bach changes the gears to the Rabbanon, even according to the Rabbanon, you can't be with two Noshim, that's if ein ishta ima. But ishta ima yavadet hashmir, b'achi gashinon, Rab Shimon Omer, af ish echad misyachad im shtei Noshim, and then he sticks a vav in, ubizman sheishta ima, yoshin ima bepundaki, b'pnei sheishta mishamartoi, and that halacha, that ishta mishamartoi, the asa nafilu l'Rabbanon, v'afilu mishachas. So in fact, this machlokes Rashi and Tosfos is brought down to Shulchan Aruch Paskins l'chumra, that you cannot be miyached with two noshim, and the Ramah Paskins l'chula. So there's actually a machlokes about it. I'm sure today there's another factor involved. The Gemara introduces that today we're prutzim, we're not as holy, and the Gemara discusses what's called holy enough. And there are Amoraim who felt they weren't holy enough to rely on the fact that two men are enough, that it's not a problem of yichud. So most people today would hold that it wouldn't be allowed, but with a crowd it would be allowed. And there's also other factors involved, that if you know the women well, if your main malacha is with women, so you're generally more comfortable with women. If you own a woman's clothing store or a grocery store where you have a relationship with women, that makes it much more chomer than someone who generally doesn't deal with women, and by nature he's more uncomfortable. There's a lot of factors here that have to be discussed with a local rabbi.
My daughter had a stroke and he had an atheist. Remember, we have to have three einiglich there that it shouldn't be with him.
Zok the Gemara. Lo yishachad adam mishnoshim, aval isha achas mishachedes mishnoshim. Shimon Omer af ishachad mishachad mishnoshim bezman shishte imoy v'yoshin imon b'pundaki. They can even sleep together if they ishte mishamarta. Mishachad adam im imoy v'mbito. A person's allowed to be miyachad with his mother and his daughter. Those are also chayv krisus. V'yoshin imon b'kir bosser. He can even sleep with them in the same bed when they're young. But the Megdilu, once they're old enough, then zu yishana b'chsusa v'zeh yashan b'chsusa, they can't mamish sleep together with kir bosser, because even then they could lead to an isser. And there's a big machlokes we're showing him if the isser yichud is midaraisa or not. Even if there are certain types of isur yichud that are daraisa, over time the chachamim added on more and more isurim. For instance, there's the midaraisa, the isur yichud would only be if it would be a woman that there's a chiv kares on. What if it's a goita? What if it's a pnuya? Those are isur yichud, but they're only osur midrabanan. The isur to be miyachad with a pnuya was, I think, put into place by David HaMelech because of the ma'isa of because there was a ma'isa over there, right? So there were definitely add-ons to the halacha, add-ons midrabanan to the base halacha of yichud, even if it is deraisa. But there's a shaila gufa if it's deraisa, and we'll see what the pasuk is later in the Gemara. My time a ton of dveilio. Why is there an issue of yichud, even if there's two women involved? Because hoyel v'noshim da'atin kalas alei. It's possible that even two women won't be a shmir. We know immediately. How do we know this halacha of yichud? And this is why there's a tzad to say that it's deraisa. Where do you see a remez leyichud min hatayra? And that's why you could see it's a discussion. It's a remez. Is it a raya that it's an issue of raya or not? It says legabe a completely different sugya legabe mesis. Ki yisischa achicha benimecha. It's funny. Why would the Torah say benimecha? It should say ki yisischa achicha. It's really talking about somebody leading someone astray. What's in the gay of it? Benimecha. Frankly, more ben aim mesis ben am ein mesis. Elaloi malach. The Torah is just trying to tell you an aside. Ben misyachad amimoy. A ben could be miyached with his mother, but also lihisyached in kol arayis shabbatay. So this is the shaila. Does that make it into a rice, into a dairaisa, or is it merely cross machta? Because the Gemara calls it a remes. Frankly, Gemara, that's not pasuk shot of the book. Pasuk of krabba maiksiv. Lamaisa, what does the pasuk shot of the pasuk mean? Why legabe meses does the Torah discuss ben yimecha and not ben avicha? Amar by lomi boykam. Telling you a chiddush. Lomi boy benav. Normally, if you're brothers and you share a father, you don't like your brother. You know why? The sonny lay. Why do you hate him? Because of him you got less Yerusha. He's minimizing your chelik Yerusha. So therefore, he might be doctor tell you bad eitzes. Elafidu benem. Even if you only share a mother, where you're not threatened by him, so you could trust him fully. The loin tanilei, maybe you should suggest that you should listen to him to do averes. Kamash Milan, to do averes, you listen to nobody. Name of Asnisin Dolei Kabashol. Let's suggest that our mission is not like Abashol. The time we learned, Kol Shloishim Yoim, all 30 days, which means Rachman al-Islam, a baby that was less than 30 days died. It doesn't get a regular levaya, but you could take it out the chayk. You could just hold it in your hand. The baby doesn't have to have all of the preparations that a normal mace has. And when they go to bury it, you don't need a minion. The nikfor be'isha achas ushnei anosh. The burial crew could be one woman and two men. So there's a problem of yichud. It's one woman and two men. Avoloi be'isha achas ushnei noshim, but not with one man and two women. Abashol omer af be'ishechad ushtei noshim. Abashol says even ishechad ushtei noshim. So this is where some of the we're trying to bring a raya from. If in fact Reb Shimon holds ishachas ushtei noshim without any other shmira is going to be good, like Tosfos holds, so then why did the Gemara say like Abashol? The Gemara could have said Abashol holds like Reb Shimon. Why does the Mishnah say like Abashol? The Mishnah should have said Abashol holds like Reb Shimon. So from there, there are some achronim who bring a raya that it must be that even Reb Shimon holds that you cannot be miyachad v'shtei noshim only if your wife is there. Abashol Omer af be'ishechad v'shtei noshim. Zok Gemara no afilu tema Abashol. Abashol can agree in our Mishnah. Normally, you're not allowed to be miyachad with two noshim, but b'shas aniyas tavar yitzrei. They're bearing a kid. They're not going to be mizanin now. So therefore, when you're bearing a child, when you're in such a terrible situation, there we're not worried about the HR. But in the normal case, avada, one man may not be miyachad to two women. For Rabban Shavah L'Kar B'Yitzchak, that the HR doesn't stop working at all. Dam Rabbi Yitzchak, it says in the pasuk, Ma Yisoinen. This is an Eicha. Ma Yisoinen Adam Chai. How will a person? We're going to first see the Dirash Pshat. Ma Yisoinen Adam Chai. Even someone who's an onion, Gavar Al Chatov, Gavar Al Chatov, Afilu B'Shas Aninu Shel Adam. Even when someone's an onion, he's going through terrible tsar. Yitzray Miskaber Alav. His Yitzhar can be Miskaber upon him. So that's the svara of the Rabbanon. They hold that the Shas Haninus will not protect him. And even with Shas Haninus, you need to have a Shmira. And you can't have Yichud. Abashol, he'll say, Ki ksivahu b'misrayim al midosav ksiv. Talk about somebody who's complaining that he doesn't have it good. Hashem's giving him a hard time. Ma yisrayim al midosav. How dare you complain about how the Rebbeinu Shalom is treating you? Are you a person who's totally clean of Averis and you're entitled to a perfect life? Be happy with the life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you. You don't even deserve that. For Rabbanon, this is such a geshmaka line because there's actually two pshatim in Rashi and one pshat in Tosfos about what this means. So the Rabbanon will hold that you still need to be concerned, even b'shas alavaya, that they'll do an aveira. Rashi says one story where we're concerned that yes, if it's tak alavaya, it's not a problem. But if you're going to say it's good, people could take. Let's say a woman wants to do znos with a man. They'll take a child. They'll make believe the child died, and they'll say they're going out to bury the child, and that will cause that will do an aveira. So that's what the Rabbanan says. There was a story where they wanted to do znos, so they covered it up by taking a baby along, and they went out, and in fact, it led to an aveir. That's one pshat of Rashi. But the other pshat of Rashi is that it's not going on the Rabbanan; it's going on Abashol. Abashol said that the pasuk is talking about somebody who complains that he's not being dealt the life that he deserves. So the story that's referring to is a different story. It's about a woman whose son died, and she went crying and complaining that, oh, how could Hashem do this to me? And what happened because of that is that her next son died, and it brought down until all of her children died. She was still complaining, and then she herself died. So Rashi is going to the Rapshat. It's kehu ma'isa dahi itza, dava uvda, but not vafikte, because vafikte has nothing to do with the story. No, the hava uvda vafikte is not relevant. It's just the story of this woman. Shemesu zayin bonel v'hi achareyam. Why? She was constantly complaining. Toisvis explains on the case that it's a tzadz nus. He shares with us an absurd story. I'm going to read the story inside because it's like an off the charts story. There was a woman. Her husband had just died, fresh grave, and she's sitting there crying by her husband's graveside. There was a person who was given capital punishment by the king, and he had to watch this body that was hanging on the gallows. And this person was appointed by the king, you need to watch this body. He's sitting there by the gallows. He sees this beautiful widow crying by her husband's grave. And he said, are you mourning? Let's have a good mourning. And they did a terrible affair. She listened to him. He took his eyes off the ball, and this tully went missing. Now he panicked. The king's going to kill me. What happened to the body? Don't worry. Dig up my husband. You see from here. That's an off the charts absurd story, but I'll call upon him. You see that the Yetzer Hara works 24/7, 365. He never ever gives up. Zok the Gemara weiter. Aval isha achas. Amar Yehuda. Amar Rav Lashon Olebek. That we say two men you could rely on. That's if they're kosher or mentioned. Of Baprutim, if they're promiscuous men, Beyasara Nami Loy. Even 10 men you can't trust. And have a Maisa. But to you, Asara Bemita. They wanted to be Mizana with her. 10 men took a woman out. She played dead, and they were Mizana with her. Amar Yosef Teda. I'll prove to you that when men get together and when they're prutzim, they do affairs, they're not embarrassed of each other. The michbur be'asar v'gavik shura. Sometimes if there's a big heist, there's a team of robbers who get together. If you need more people, so if they're stealing a beam, we need multiple people. They work together and they're not embarrassed from each other. So you see that by prutzos you cannot trust them at all. Okay, let's stop here and we'll be mamshus Be'ez Hashem tomorrow.
Zalman, Deutsche Schule,